Good afternoon, all of you. So now we begin with chapter 14, Economic Survey, which is on AI, artificial intelligence ecosystem in India. This chapter is more important from mains point of view and economic services point of view. But mains GS paper 3 also you will need this chapter. There are many questions that can be formulated from this chapter. So the survey begins by saying that the AI potential and preparedness infrastructure, institutions, etc. are now currently growing in India, and now AI is a reality. Like even 5 years ago, AI used to be a projected thing, but now AI is a reality. A survey says 88% firms are using AI, 31% are scaling it up, 7% are fully integrated with AI, and the usage is majorly concentrated in the high income country, 58.4%, but 31% of emerging market economies and 22% of even underdeveloped economies are now some way or the other using AI. So AI is growing at pretty fast pace. Then the survey says, apart from that now this is the graph they show, that in 2022 50% firms were using AI, then 55% by 23, 72% 24, 88% 25. So which means that at least one business function by these respondents is through AI. Then the survey says that there is widespread usage, but advanced model development, the large language models at advanced level, is highly concentrated among few firms in developed economies. So that is what is happening, that it is concentrated among few firms in developed economies. That is because ये क्यों है ऐसा, ये concentration? It requires very large capital, computation power, data availability, energy usage, and talent. So that is why it is said that the concentration of AI in the large language system is still in a few hands. Of course, the short-term labor impact is seen that there is no major disruption in the short-term market. AI exposed jobs are also not showing any major difference. In fact, there is minimal difference between jobs exposed to AI, jobs not exposed to AI when it comes to when it comes to job disruptions. And workers may benefit in the near term by improved productivity. So it may look positive that way, that in the near term the workers can look better off through improved productivity. But then the limits are productivity gains from AI have a ceiling, then joblessness begins. So the productivity gains have a ceiling and then joblessness begins. कि एक समय के बाद AI ceiling पे जाता है और जॉबलेसनेस की शुरुआत होगी, क्योंकि उसके बाद वर्कर्स को एक्स्ट्रा कुछ करने को बचेगा नहीं, एंड प्रोडक्टिविटी विल नॉट गो बियॉन्ड अ लिमिट, एंड अनसर्टेनिटी persists in the long term labor impact because we don't know at the moment how machines will interact with the other features of the society and economy, how we will be able to train the workers, how the untrained workers can be assimilated. So there's a lot of uncertainty about long term. Now what are the structural concerns? Concentration of data in few hands. So that is one concern. Computation challenge. It needs a lot of computation power. It needs a lot of microchips and all, which is not available. Models, designing and development. How are you designing the model? How are you developing the model? And standards, no fixed standard set. Because standardization has not yet happened. Every country, every system, even every company is developing its own model. The risks are concentrated market power, dependence on few, and supply chain issues will be there because a lot of suppliers are concentrated in small geography, especially South China Sea, Eastern Pacific, and if there is any challenge there, we will be all in trouble. And threat to India's IT sector competitiveness if adaptation lags. So Indian IT sector, which used to be the back end of the world, now a lot of that job will be done by AI. So if adaptation of Indian IT sector doesn't happen, it will be a threat to Indian IT sector also. Of course, countries differ in AI governance approaches, and India will have to align regulation with its economic context. So what is that economic context? Less trained people, labor intensive economy, and few large firms. So India has to make sure that its workers don't suffer, people get training at the right time, and few large firms are not able to manipulate the entire market. So India will have to develop. India should not remain an AI consumer. India should try becoming a developer, but the survey says India should be innovating in AI rather than inventing AI. अब इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? Inventing AI means creating your own large language models. Innovating AI means using the existing LLMs for developing your own methods or your own businesses. Say, for example, using AI to predict weather report, using AI to predict seed quality, using AI to predict fault in machines in an industry, to predict rainfall in a coastal region. And all that can be done using existing large language models by India innovating it to the needs that India will have. Then from the US service sector, we see that the labor displacement versus augmentation, the evidence still limited. So displacement means labor removed or replaced, augmentation means productivity enhanced. अब ये दोनों चीजें हो रही हैं, प्रोडक्टिविटी भी बढ़ रही है लेकिन कुछ लेबर भी गायब हो रहे हैं, तो इस पे मिक्स्ड इम्पैक्ट देखने को मिला है. इसलिए बिकॉज टेक्नोलॉजी इज वेरी न्यू, इंटीग्रेशन इज नॉट कंप्लीट into existing systems. So once the integration gets completed into existing systems, we will be in a better position to judge where we are. Constant developments means new models developed on a daily basis. So still cost benefit analysis is not clear. So AI impact is about how, कहाँ पे impact करेगा और कब, not whether. Impact तो होना ही है, ये पक्की बात है, बट कितना impact कहाँ पे होगा ये देखने की बात है. लेबर को अभी वो कॉम्प्लीमेंट कर रहा है, लेबर देयर इज कॉम्प्लीमेंटैरिटी पॉसिबल इन लेटर फेज दैट देयर कैन बी अ सब्स्टिट्यूशन. So we see that in the empirical survey, employment has not fallen sharply, there is no abrupt contraction. We also see in it that firms are hiring or reallocating workers to adopt to AI. But jobs are becoming less dependent on economic growth. Like earlier, as economic growth used to happen, jobs would be created. That's not happening now because AI is adding to productivity, which is adding to growth, but automatically it is not adding to employment as much. Similarly, growth may not create as many jobs as before. And now, paraphrasing the words of T.S. Eliot, the change comes not in a single shock, but in a quite steady drift. So it is over time that the change will come. Over a period that things will be different. So it is important that we start skilling people, we start training people, we start adapting to the changes, and that will allow us to adapt to AI much better. Of course, we also see that there are structural asymmetries. Some countries are much better off, some are less. Some firms are much better off, some are less. And policy capabilities are constrained by trade-off arising from these asymmetries. So the frontier model development is concentrated in few large firms that is initially developing very quick, investing a lot of money into it and then waiting for it to take shape. High barriers to entry have been created because large capital is needed, a lot of computation data is needed, quality is needed, data of a large amount is needed, a lot of talent is needed. Export restrictions have been there on computing hardware, and all that is limiting new people from entering AI. So what does India need to do? Either invest in frontier model, which will need high cost, strategic control, but uncertain returns, or remain primarily an AI user, which we were talking, that be an innovator rather than an inventor and focus on domain specific AI. The costs will be lesser, domestic priorities can be given more importance, and there will be much better enhancement without committing a lot of fixed cost. We have seen that a lot of AI firms have committed a lot of fixed cost and they're paying for it. Also, there is capital labor trade-off. Productivity of capital is raised, but then the labor employment will become lesser. Another trade-off is rapid adoption will mean higher productivity and risk of job displacement. So gradual adoption is what survey is promising. Also, policy challenges, what pace to adopt at. The important is to focus on that part of AI which is augmenting labor rather than substituting labor. Also, it is important to go for open models rather than proprietary models, because in proprietary models they are owned by the firms, they are black box systems, opaque, and there is limited transparency on data and updates. So there is always a challenge that the vendor will give you a lock-in and you don't know how to improve upon the model on your own. But in an open weighted model, there will be lower entry barriers. Anybody can enter and make a change, make an improvement. Adaptability is better. You can customize according to your own benefits. Local innovation is improved and dependence on the bigger one is reduced. The risk is there will be quality variation because multiple people are developing it. There will be fragmentation without coordination because there is no one set of firm or one set of people who are operationalizing it. So the trade-off is between reliability, scale and performance. If it is proprietary model, then reliability is more, scale can be higher, performance can be better. If it is open or open weighted model, then flexibility is more, accessibility is easier and strategic autonomy is more. Now, for the government, the thinking is that there is an infrastructure trade-off, compute scale versus resource constraints. So AI requires high energy, high water supply, capital strains infrastructure, and it competes with household and industrial resource demand for these factors. तो अगर किसी देश ने अपने यहाँ AI के लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल ज़्यादा डेवलप करने की कोशिश की तो कंप्यूटेशन पावर ज़्यादा डेवलप करना होगा, तो वाटर, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, लैंड, इन सब के डिमांड करेंगे, डेटा सेंटर्स एंड ऑल, तो उसके बाद इंडस्ट्री और एग्रीकल्चर के लिए ये कम बच पाएगा, हाउसिंग के लिए कम बच पाएगा, तो वो ट्रेड ऑफ भी ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा. तो क्या क्या ट्रेड ऑफ हमने पढ़े? पहला, सेंट्रलाइज्ड वर्सेस डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड स्मॉलर मॉडल्स. दूसरा, रेगुलेशन वर्सेस इनोवेशन. तीसरा स्केल वर्सेस इंक्लूजन. चौथा, ओपन वर्सेस प्रोप्राइटरी मॉडल. देन we have if we have stricter regulation, we have safety, accountability, higher cost. If we have lighter regulation, there will be innovation, but there are risks that then the model can be developed in any way and we don't know whether it will be conducive for human development or not, or it might become dangerous. So that is something that is another challenge. Then there is geopolitical trade-off. So AI is a geostrategic asset because AI can be used for multiple activities, from food security to defense to strategic security, oil wells and drills being developed. And AI inputs like chips, software, etc. have a lot of export control, creating geopolitical risks. So over dependence on outsiders creates these risks. The trade-off again is either maintain strategic autonomy or global integration. The important thing is we should go for global integration without compromising strategic autonomy by developing friends, by developing supply sources, diversifying supply chain, and that can be done by India. Technological self-sufficiency completely is neither feasible nor possible. If somebody thinks I will be able to develop from tip to toe the entire AI supply chain, that's a fool's paradise. You can't do that. So survey says maintain balance between openness and insulating critical functions from external shocks. So the critical functions should be within your own control and you should be able to play an important role in the global value chain. But other than that, you will have to develop and formalize yourself by diversification. Of course, China controls 11%, high income countries 73% of total AI data centers. India has only 3%. So there is a long distance to go for India in that. Now, if we look at development oriented approach to AI, Niti Aayog says that India's labor market will have to go beyond low cost labor model towards more value creating and dignified employment. क्योंकि जो low cost labor है, जो lower end के काम करता है, जैसे stenos, typists and so on, or data interpreters, AI can start replacing them very soon. Compounders, helpers, AI will start replacing them. So, but it will generate its own spillovers in services, defense, manufacturing, where new types of jobs will start emerging. So it is important that AI should be taken as a strategic priority for defense purposes, for countries' self-sufficiency purposes, and not only as a technology. So depending on foreign AI will be creating its own geopolitical vulnerability and constrain our choices. So it is important that AI should become tools of geostrategic negotiation like critical minerals and semiconductors. तो इसीलिए AI में self sufficient अगर हम नहीं होंगे और AI में अगर अपनी प्रोडक्शन नहीं करेंगे तो दिक्कत आएगी. तो moral of the story क्या है? Maybe we don't develop large language models, but we can have our data centers, we can use it for innovation, we can diversify the supply chain, we can have multiple sources of supply, and we can play an important role in global value chain, so that even though we may not be specializing 100%, but we will have important role in the global system, and then we will not be denied critical technology. Of course, the bottlenecks are AI will compute capacity expansion depends on finance, infrastructure, and hardware access. So the rising graphic processing unit demand and supply shortages increase costs, affecting viability. And this rising demand will come from global competitors also. क्योंकि ये GPU का डिमांड सिर्फ इंडियन फर्म्स नहीं करेंगे, ये ग्लोबल कॉम्पिटिटर्स से भी ये डिमांड ज्यादा बढ़ेगा, तो इससे कॉस्ट्स बढ़ेंगे और हमारे कॉस्ट ऑफ डेवलपमेंट बढ़ेगा. So this is one situation. Second situation is when demand is not the constraint. Say we have a lot of GPUs produced and a lot of people available in that, but expansion is limited by complementary inputs, especially GPU availability. So demand is not a challenge. Now suppose a lot of demand is there in India for AI production, data centers are available, but the challenge is enough GPU is not available. A third situation is, that what if finance is not available, or grid availability and hardware access is not available. So in that case, if there is high GPU price, prolonged financial stress, that will reduce project viability, and there will be gap between financial readiness and execution due to hardware shortages. So what does India need to do? Promote good hardware system, promote good financing capability, and promote good quality GPU supply, including gradual development of GPUs within India. And that will allow India to have its own AI models, develop its innovation, and go long term. Also, we see that when we talk of high domestic demand with easy finance, if financing improves, the bottlenecks now shifts faster to GPU access. Now strong demand plus liquidity, suppose easy money is there, will still fail if capacity expansion will not happen if GPU is not available. Then we see that global GPU supply chains will determine expansion pace, and domestic finance or demand alone will not be sufficient. Therefore, supply side resilience is needed, जो मैं आपको अभी बता रहा था. Along with financing support, global supply diversification is needed, and National Semiconductor Mission will have to be promoted for long-term development. Also, there is a bottom-up approach that we need. West has gone for top-down approach. Few big firms developing frontier models, investing heavily, and trying to control the market. For India, it is suggested we go for bottom-up approach, distribute the model, application focus, that is innovation rather than invention, localized development, and making sure that there is gradual development. And given India's situation, this is what will do things. What are India's strengths? We have strong AI research output and technical talent. AI literacy is only second to US, and there is diverse domestic data set across sectors underutilized. Mind you, India is the only country apart from China with a billion plus population. So we have diverse possibility of data points in India, plus our population is much more heterogeneous than China, which means there will be much more heterogeneous data that will come from India, which will be great for AI learning and the new tools to be developed. So India has that advantage. Another advantage India has is that we are a democracy, so the fear that people will have about misuse of data will be much lesser. Another advantage that India doesn't have, which India needs for AI development, is computation capacity. So India will have to build more computation capacity. So three things are needed to develop good AI models. Diverse data, India has it. Democratic pattern of development, India has it. Computation possibilities, which are very large, India doesn't have it as yet. We are building it through different semiconductor supply chain, etc. But that is very important. Now, so similarly, India has only 2% startups focused on curating training data. US has 40%, UK 9%, etc. So India will have to again do a catch up over there. Now, why is India having a challenge? So there is limited access to compute infrastructure, scarce financing for large scale models, and weak private participation in foundation of AI. These are challenges of India. Private sector is not participating, computation power is not there, and of course large scale models are not yet getting financed. So we need to focus on application specific small models. We need to have lower computation needs, adaptable models, usable on local hardware, and then we enable broader participation. So a bottoms up approach is much better. India also has a late mover advantage, so we may not need high energy use. we don't have opaque systems. The high cost seen in frontier models we can avoid, and we can do better design, better choices, decentralized practices, and go bottoms up. Also, the open decentralized ecosystem will promote open source and open weight models, making sure that the performance gap relative to closed models is gradually closed up, and we are able to become as efficient as what the initial developers have been. Also, there is a leverage developer base under India AI mission for shared innovation. So in that case, leverage developer base means use the combination of multiple developers who have come together under India AI mission and reduce reliance on foreign proprietary systems to develop our own domestic capabilities. Also, the coordination role of the state is very important. Data fragmentation can be addressed by the state because we have a lot of digital public infrastructure which can be used by that. Standardization through law. There should be a specific law about standard use of AI development. Interoperability through open system, open network. So there can be interoperability which will help also. An AI open system initiative, there will be sovereign led, that is government led. AI will be developed as public good, the way we have developed UPI, Aadhaar, and that will mean there will be expanded data sets, shared computation, common platforms. There will be a centralized code repository under India AI mission, but that will collaborate to develop the way GitHub has been developed. So private sector role will be greater participation of domestic firms, scaling up the methods, and shift from IT back office to IT front office, and that will gradually develop the whole AI model as India grows. Of course, there has to be frugal AI in India. India's development will be bottoms up. India will go for particular places like startups, municipalities, community institutions, and in sectors like health, agriculture, education, urban management, etc. So then different usage are there given, like in healthcare, it can be used for thermal imaging, for breast cancer, etc. Low cost AI assisted oral cancer screening. It's already happening in some cases in Jharkhand and Bihar. In Bengaluru, urban and environment system based water management has been developed. AI based landslide alerts in Himalayan regions. तो ये आप use कर सकते हैं as examples of AI use in India. और मैं सजेस्ट करूंगा इस चैप्टर को कंबाइन करना मेंस के पहले जो पिछले इकोनॉमिक सर्वे का चैप्टर था ऑन यूज ऑफ एआई, और इन दोनों को जब तुम साथ ले लोगे तो एआई पे एक फुल फ्लेजेड आंसर मिल जाएगा तुम्हें. देन ऑफ कोर्स if we go further in agriculture and education, we see they are improving market access, price discovery, logistics for farmers. Classroom outcomes are getting improved. There is a pilot in Pimpri Chinchwad in Maharashtra which shows improved engagement, accountability, and supervision. Also, Bhashini is helping us, and AI for Bharat, enabling voice and language based access, works on low cost devices. So that way access overall is developing. We are scaling bottom up innovations, providing shared infrastructure, standard governance funding, and preserving local innovation and diversity. Now, human capital for AI is of course needed. We need software engineering, hands-on experience, and algorithmic knowledge. All that is tacit knowledge. Need to attract experienced practitioners जो बाहर काम कर चुके हो, तो हम अपने डायस्पोरा को इंडिया इनवाइट कर सकते हैं and they can do the work. Global experience will be needed, and education reforms are needed, that is early exposure at the school college level, curriculum flexibility should be there, and passage will enable freedom to keep evolving for higher education. Also, the education work experience divide is now weakening. AI will reduce value of entry level roles because in US also we see that high school fellowships are being offered for early experience. So it is important that we develop earn and learn model. From 11th standard only, people can be allowed to earn their money and learn while working on the data model sets, and that will be a better idea. The national education policy can be of some help there because it will help us in moving between education and work. So people can take a dropout, take a specialization, come back into their graduation course, continue for one more year. Also, national education policy is developing the foundational level of education, developing literacy, numeracy, reasoning, problem solving, etc., to make sure that AI can be adapted easily in India. Also, identify high skill, understaffed, non-white collar sectors like nursing, geriatric care, physiotherapy, advanced trade, early education, advanced agriculture. ये सारे जगह हैं जहाँ पर modern manufacturing All these are places which are at the moment have less workers, but will need a lot of workers in future. Then of course, you have to align skilling infrastructure for migration support. The emerging trend is that AI may increase demand for experience intensive roles. For example, if you need a bot टू बी ट्रेन्ड टू टीच, तो जो कोचिंग के टीचर्स हैं वो ज़्यादा बेहतर पढ़ा पाएंगे उस बॉट को कि पढ़ाना कैसे है, क्योंकि वो 1-to-1 एडवांस करने के ज़्यादा आदत में है कंपेयर टू इवन वेरी एजुकेटेड professors in a college. That is a possibility that can emerge. So it is looking for more experienced role rather than only educated role, which we will also have to take care of. And of course, experience integrated human capital, not degree centric model, जो मैं अभी आपको समझा रहा था, should be the basic idea कि workers को on the job experience मिले. It should not only be a purpose to earn a degree. Then the recent research has shown that AI may erode relevance of cognitive labor. Survey views that AI is not replacing human contribution, it is only reshaping it. So in that case, you will have to use humans for summarizations of judgment, direction, expertise synthesis. So AI is best understood as a powerful ship rather than an independent navigator. That is what the survey is saying. Now, of course, AI doesn't have context and salience. Humans are needed. AI will have the knowledge, but AI will not have the context of that knowledge. So that context will be important. For example, AI can tell you about a US-Iran war with respect to expertise of a war person, but AI may not know the cultural ethos in US, cultural ethos in Iran, context of the war, other countries playing a role, and all that can have its own role in human judgment. Then of course humans frame questions, assess trade-offs. AI may not assess trade-off. AI may only work for the objective that it has been given. तो अगर आप किसी AI को बोलेंगे कि ऑब्जेक्टिव ये है कि देश में सभी लोगों के पास सफिशिएंट पीने का पानी होना चाहिए, हो सकता है उनका एल्गोरिथम उन्हें पढ़ा दे कि अच्छा ठीक है, सफिशिएंट पीने का पानी हो जाए, अगर लोग ही कम हो जाए तो देश के आधे लोगों को मार दो, पानी हो जाएगा और लोग कम होने की वजह से तो थैनोस बन जाएंगे AI. So it's always a possibility. So that is why the AI has a lack of depth, so it will result in fluent but shallow output. Also, ability to interrogate, filter, apply nuance. AI has not yet developed itself in all that. So, if we read across data, history, AI amplifies returns to prior knowledge but doesn't create new knowledge. Users who run widely and deeply are better able to steer models, and they will be able to use AI even better for their usage. Also, the work style will shift. Cognitive workers must act as a system architect, decompose problems, sequence queries, define constraints and evaluation criteria, and develop structured thinking and not only prompt engineering. And all that will mean that humans will then be able to overcome the domain constraint created by AI. Of course, AI will raise the threshold for meaningful contribution instead of replacing it. So humans will have to be more humans, for making sure that AI is giving them support. Implication for skilling is focus on domain depth, no more. Analytical reasoning, think more. Structured problem solving, analyze with solution oriented approach. And continuous learning, keep growing with new knowledge. And those who will be able to do it will keep building better judgment capacity, better context awareness. They will be able to develop themselves better in the AI world. So this was what the impact on labor for AI. Now what is the governance that will need to evolve? So of course AI is getting innovated at a much faster pace than regulation. Different countries have their own methods. EU Artificial Intelligence Act, China has sector specific laws, US has voluntary principles, India has built on Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology guidelines aligned with national priorities and labor market realities. So AI should serve, not replace humans. That is the objective. AI Economic Council is being proposed in India to calibrate pace of AI adoption. Calibrate means to slow down according to need of labor market. Of course, and then map job impact. किस सेक्टर पे ज़्यादा असर पड़ेगा, किन ज्योग्राफी में ज़्यादा असर पड़ेगा, ऑटोमेशन वर्सेस ऑगमेंटेशन कहाँ कहाँ होगा. So the geographies which will be more affected, sectors which will be more affected, there should be a preparation of how to save workers in those systems. Then of course policy utility, reduce uncertainty in AI deployment, that's important for governance, inform education and skilling reforms, introduce transparency, reporting as in social media and product registration. And what is deployment governance? Where and how AI is deployed. For example, in education, AI should supplement, not substitute learning. तो अगर कोई स्टूडेंट अपना पूरे का पूरा असाइनमेंट AI को यूज करके बना रहे हैं तो उनको ट्रबल होगा, लेकिन अगर कोई स्टूडेंट AI के थ्रू अपने असाइनमेंट को इनहेंस कर रहे हैं और अपने अपने इंडिपेंडेंट थिंकिंग को कैलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं तो उन्हें फायदा होगा. दैट इज द डिफरेंस इन से एजुकेशन. Risks are overuse of generative AI, which will reduce critical thinking, जो मैं भी आपको बता रहा था. Evidence from MIT and Microsoft, the cognitive decline with excessive reliance has been observed due to lack of analytical reasoning at school level. Teach children critical thinking from school level and we will get much better result. So MIT has proposed AI governance group plus technical committee. It will be light touch, that is less restrictive. It won't intervene very frequently. Incentive based, that is promotes efficiency. Risk weighted regulation. Governance as a continuous process of monitoring and adaptation. Now, what is this AI Economic Council for India? It will be separate from Governance Council. It will align AI deployment with education, skilling, resource constraints, development priorities, and it will combine technological and moral imperatives so that there is no confusion between technological development and moral output that comes out of it. Human primacy will be there, humans will be given the primacy, economic purposes should be satisfied, and AI will be subordinate to human welfare and inclusion, and every AI development must show some net social and economic benefit. Also, it should account for informality, skill diversity, weak safety nets, and it should require ex-ante labor market assessments. That is very important. Then sequencing over speed, there is phase adoption based on readiness, that is no hurry, there should be impact assessment before model introduction. So classify use cases, deploy now, पायलट प्रोजेक्ट एंड डेफर देम. ये तीन तरह के केसेस होंगे, या तो अभी डिप्लॉय कर दीजिए जो लो केस हैं या लो रिस्क हैं उनमें अभी डिप्लॉय कर दीजिए, डेफर कर दीजिए उन्हें जो रिस्की हैं बहुत ज्यादा, और पायलट प्रोजेक्ट इंट्रोड्यूस कीजिए जहां पर थोड़ा कंफ्यूजन है कि एग्जैक्टली क्या करना चाहिए. देन ऑफ कोर्स को इवोल्यूशन ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी एंड ह्यूमन कैपिटल. So skill policy is equal to technology policy. Parallel focus on education reform, reskilling, vocational adaptation, so that we make sure that we are skilling people according to the need of AI. Technological knowledge is being imparted that way. Public interest safeguard like ethical boundaries are being set. Surveillance misuse is being protected from. Worker monitoring, algorithmic bias, opacity, इनसे बचने के safeguards भी डाले जा सके. तो ये purpose है of data as factor of product, और ये purpose है of the objectives and spirit of governance. That is the basic idea. And Economic Council for India का purpose क्या होगा? The role will be the core principles and then how those core principles will be applicable. Now, when we look at data as a strategic resource, of course, data is a factor of production. There will be large digital base, wide broadband access in India. More than 100 crore people now have broadband access in India. Diversity and scale will create comparative advantage in data. But global AI is dominated by few firms and they will have access to our data. And value extraction will be there without domestic value capture. So, value extraction means using India's data for gains of MNCs without domestic value capture, without using those models for growth in India. So this is the challenge that we tend to see. So that is why training data scarcity emerging globally. We see that Synthetic data reduces model quality. If you create data from synthetic sources, the quality of the model is compromised because actual humans don't behave like that. So firms will seek fresh human generated data, and that will increase the value of India's database. So we will have to balance openness with domestic value retention and avoid rigid data localization and focus on accountability and alignment, so that Indian data set is aligned with foreign data system. We are open to sending our data abroad, but we also need it to be used for India's betterment. Then of course the objectives and spirit are, there are three core objectives of data governance: preserve cross-border data flows for innovation and investment, ensure regulatory oversight for use of Indian data, and enable domestic value creation from Indian data. तो एक तो क्रॉस बॉर्डर डेटा फ्लो होने दीजिए फॉर इनोवेशन इन्वेस्टमेंट, लेकिन ये पक्का रखिए कि इंडियन डेटा कहीं भी यूज हो उसके ऊपर रेगुलेटरी ओवरसाइट बनी रहे और डोमेस्टिक वैल्यू क्रिएशन इंडियन डेटा से बनता रहे। अकाउंटेबिलिटी कहाँ फिक्स होनी चाहिए? ट्रांसफर्स अलाउड विथ रेगुलेटरी विजिबिलिटी, जहां पर रेगुलेटरी विजिबिलिटी दी जाएगी वहीं पे ट्रांसफर अलाउ किए जाएंगे। साथ में गवर्नमेंट को परमिशन होना चाहिए टू इंटरवीन इफ इट इज नीडेड। डेटा मस्ट रिमेन ऑडिटेबल, रिट्रीवेबल एंड ट्रेसेबल। ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि हमें पता ही नहीं चले कि हमारा डेटा कहाँ भेज दिया गया, किसने इस्तेमाल किया, किस काम के लिए इस्तेमाल हुआ। साथ में रेगुलेटर्स कैन इन्फोर्स डिलीशन इफ इट इज मिसयूज्ड, रीट्रेनिंग, suspension. Retraining because if there is some kind of bias fed into AI tool, and suspension if it is irretrievable challenge. Also, the data categorization approach is needed, that is built on Digital Data Protection Act, treating data as homogeneous, and move beyond that, classify based on sensitivity and economic use, and focus on large scale behavioral transactional inferred database used in datasets used in AI. ये इंपॉर्टेंट है, डेटा कैटेगराइज कैसे की जाए, डीपीडीपी एक्ट यूज किया जाए सो दैट होमोजेनाइटी के बियॉन्ड जा सके, क्लासिफाई बेस्ड ऑन सेंसिटिविटी एंड इकोनॉमिक यूज, साथ में फोकस ऑन लार्ज स्केल बिहेवियरल ट्रांजैक्शनल इन्फर्ड डेटा सेट्स विच आर यूज्ड इन एआई. Then of course it further says what is adaptive regulation. Categories defined via rules, subordinate legislation, and allow flexibility without frequent legal amendment so that we can adapt the regulatory system. And risk-based obligations, graduated compliance based on risk and economic impact. Low risk data should be minimal restriction, have a free flow. High impact data, there should be transparency, auditability, so that misuse is not taken up. Then of course incentivizing localization, so mirrored data requirement is important. Make sure that contemporaneous copies are developed and kept in India. Also regulatory oversight is there if processing is happening offshore. Cost of mandatory localization can be avoided because the mirroring of data can happen, and sovereignty will be exercised through enforceable rights. Also obligations of scale with size, sensitivity, etc. should be put in. If there are large number of Indian users, government should become more conscious. If there is use in foundation or general purpose models, we should become more conscious. If there is significant revenue from Indian data, we should become more conscious. And reliance on public or regular data sets, we should become more conscious and apply data localization. अगर इन चारों में से कुछ हो रहा है तो data localization पे ध्यान देने की ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है. Adaptive regulation क्या होगा? Categories defined via rules, Differential compliance कहाँ जरूरत होगी? Stricter norms for large high impact entities, so make sure that if there's a high impact entity, large data transfer norms are stricter, and lighter regime for startups, research institutions, etc. Also, data governance is not only limited to movement controls, it should focus on capturing economic value from Indian data. And firms that derive substantial benefits can contribute in the form of local training fine-tuning, financial contributions linked to Indian data-driven revenues, data compute funding support to public data trusts, support for AI lab skilling, university collaboration. So we should have a flexible system, but then the public goals should be attained by making sure that Indian data is not only used by foreigners for their own purposes, it's also used for Indian development by either using them, data revenue can be taken by India, or use that, we'll give you data, you give us training, you give us model development, we give you data if you give us public benefits, and so on. Of course, regulating AI firms is important, so location-based regulation is impractical because the firms can have multiple cross-border entity. So what is the key requirement that we need to do? Maintain dataset provenance records, publish standardized model documentation so that everybody has information, where is the data stored, what is happening with the data, what is your model development pattern, conduct impact assessments to make sure that it should not become high risk in nature, like data should not be used to promote manipulation of mindsets or electoral pattern mindsets manipulation, and keep them public so that people also know that what exactly is being done. Also implement post-deployment monitoring and harm reporting. Targeted restrictions are export controls on model weights only for narrow high risk categories. जैसे अगर किसी कंट्री के स्ट्रेटेजिक डेटा की बात है उसको रोकिए, कोई एथनिक डेटा की बात है उसको रोकिए, क्योंकि ये हाई रिस्क कैटेगरीज हैं, इनसे डिफरेंसेस क्रिएट किए जा सकते हैं. इंटरवेन ओनली व्हेन हार्म इज डेमोन्स्ट्रेबल. अगर बात में आप इंटरवीन करेंगे और डेटा को लोकलाइज करना चाहेंगे तो डेवलपमेंट के कॉस्ट पर होगा ये, तो वो नहीं होना चाहिए. तो इंसेंटिव बेस्ड रेगुलेशन कैसे प्ले करें? प्रेफरेंस फॉर पॉजिटिव इंसेंटिव्स ओवर mandates, like allow firms to use certified domestic data, compute environments, reduced audit burden, faster approvals. So firms which will go by the government norms will be given these benefits. Access to national AI programs, and all that will mean that the firms will have a positive incentive to participate in the data system and data arrangements rather than being mandated to do that. Also, link compliance to government data sets, AI missions and regulatory sandboxes, public procurement opportunities. So government की जो procurement systems हैं, government के जो databases हैं, AI sandboxes जो develop हो रहे हैं, उनमें compliance को link करिए so that आप learning by doing कर सकें. ठीक है, sandbox में रहेगा तो पता चलेगा कि कितना compliance possible है, कितना compliance possible नहीं है. So over the period you can learn and you can realize how much can be impacted, how much cannot be, and so on, and positions India in the global AI economy. Of course, AI as a general purpose technology has high benefits but high risks, like nuclear energy. So it will need enabling and constraining institutions. So what will we do? MAT proposes AI safety institutes. The functions will be analyze the risk, regulatory gaps should be identified, coordination should be developed, and training should be made more improved. Transparency has to be the priority, because otherwise if it is opaque, then we will be in a trouble where sometimes obscure results will happen, multiple large language models can be developed without people knowing its implication. Now, opaque safety practices, weak disclosure, unverifiable safeguards have been done by private sector, especially in USA and all, and that is something we should be careful about. And there is information asymmetry between developers and users. AI मेरे बारे में क्या क्या जान रहा है मुझसे इंटरैक्ट करते हुए, मेरे डेटा को कैसे यूज करेगा, मेरी पर्सनल बातें सुनकर कहां तक पहुंचाएगा, ये सब बारे में यूजर्स को नहीं पता, डेवलपर्स को पता है, और यहाँ एसिमेट्रिक इंफॉर्मेशन है. Then of course there is expanding risk landscape, that is AI plus synthetic biology, non-experts could potentially engineer harmful pathogens by gene editing. Then AI models show tendency towards social psychophancy, जो करने को कहा जाता है वो करके वो दिखा देते हैं ताकि उन्हें रिजेक्ट ना किया जाए. तो इसमें यह ध्यान रखना होगा कि ऐसा ना हो कि AI को आप कुछ करने को कह रहे हैं और वो सिर्फ इसलिए कर रहा है क्योंकि वो चाहता है कि वो रिजेक्ट ना हो, तो ये एक और दिक्कत आ सकती है. Higher user trust and dependence on AI is happening, reduced critical thinking is happening, reinforcement of harmful or biased actions is happening. So we need to make sure that there is a balance between development of AI and the treatment of AI by humans, so that it doesn't create a challenge for human development. In international collaboration, we have seen that there is a collaboration with United Kingdom AI Security Institute, which provides templates for model evaluation, misuse, testing, etc. Learning from National Institute of Standard and Technology, US, risk management can be learned from there. High risk users can be restricted, like predictive policing, facial recognition misuse, in सबको रोकना, psychological manipulation, ये high risk users हैं. Then rights based approach should be used, protect individual rights at core of AI development. Institutional strengthening should be there, whistleblowers should be protected rather than penalized, and that will also help in controlling AI based development even better. Now, what is the phased roadmap for India's future? So, coordination experimentation में क्या होना चाहिए? Operationalized institutions under India AI mission, enable bottom-up innovation, shared data sets, pooled computation infrastructure that is, government hosted, developing it like a digital public infrastructure, community curated code repository, focus on, so that is the second. Third on is focus on application specific small open weight models, so that there is bottoms up approach again. Fourth is that data governance should be done by building on Digital Personal Data Protection Act, introducing data categorization, that risky data should have more restrictions, easy data, startup data should have less restrictions, and incentive domestic value retention. There should be mirror data created in India, localization should be made wherever possible. Human capital should be developed to make sure India has a scale up possibility, earn and learn pathways are created, expand curricular flexibility using existing policy tools so that more and more workers conducive for AI use are developed. Second phase is scale and formalization. In medium term, you can do that. Shared and certified domestic computation infrastructure can be expanded. Participation of large firms via incentives can be improved. And regulatory evolution should be done to introduce risk-based proportionate AI regulation and codify graduated obligations based on social scale and sector. Institutional design should be built up so that there is proper oversight on with sectoral regulators. Single omnibus AI law should be avoided, and AI safety institute should be promoted. And then in phase 3, in the long term, there should be strategic resilience, that is, advanced computing hardware should be accessed with partnership and diplomacy. Vulnerability to external shock should be reduced. Labor and education should be aligned, and AI-driven human-centric centers can be developed. And overall strategy should be sequence, coordinate, capacity build, then leverage the policy and avoid premature lock-ins and regulatory overreach. बहुत ज़्यादा रेगुलेशन लगाएंगे तो सेक्टर डेवलप नहीं करेगा, बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ों पर रेस्ट्रिक्शन लगाएंगे तो सेक्टर डेवलप नहीं करेगा, लेकिन अगर बहुत ज़्यादा छूट दे देंगे तो मिसयूज होगा. So a balance is what is needed, is what the survey is suggesting. In conclusion, they say that India has multiple choices and passive consumption of AI is high risk. So India has a late mover advantage, no doubt. It can avoid energy intensive, high cost, uncertain return models. It can focus better on localized use. It can focus better on micro usage and focus on resource efficient, public oriented AI. And India's comparative advantage is application led innovation. Domestic data is huge and human capital is only second to USA, and institutional coordination can be developed because of being a democracy. So there should be bottom up, open and interoperable systems which work sector specific with shared infrastructure. Regulation wise, India should go for data governance. Safety must evolve with deployment. AI can widen inequality, so it must align with development priorities, and policy imperative for timely coordinated action to avoid path dependence. That is, it should be important that India doesn't go on the same path as what the other countries did. It should be based on, or India should not have to depend on other countries to grow further for its own growth. India should try reaching technical convergence and then chart its own path for future growth in the economy. I again repeat, very important chapter from mains point of view. So after prelims, come back to this chapter, do it very well. It is very important. People among you who are appearing economic services, do this chapter very well. Also do the chapter I did with you in last year's economic survey. I think it was chapter 13. AI usage in India. Both these chapters will be very important to develop answers asked on artificial intelligence. Thank you all of you. I will be doing 16th chapter with you very soon. You will get it hopefully by tomorrow, and that will be the end of economic survey. I have deliberately not done chapter 10, which was climate, and chapter 15, which is urban development, because from economy's point of view, they will not be that relevant. Thank you and God bless you all. Bye-bye.